in that I come from the Internet Technical Community. This is the organization that normally works towards bottom-up policy development processes for various standards of the Internet. So the Internet Engineering Task Force is a typical forum where all the different groups, maybe from private sector, maybe from civil society, maybe from academia, and maybe from government, but we appear as a technical community addressing the needs of how we can evolve the next generation Internet for our people. Now, before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to make one or two comments here. And this relates to some of the work that the African Technical Community has done over the years, and it has a bearing on the discussion here. We have a very strong interest in institutional capacity development, in the sense that with the Internet, we do not have any institutions that help shape policy at the lowest level on the continent. In '98, when we first met as an African technical group, we were fortunate to have Honorable Tarek Kamel as a speaker, and there we defined the institutions we had to establish, and I mentioned two of them. One is the African Network Operators Group, and this is a group that tries to develop capacity among its operators to know how to scale their networks as demand increases, because demand is growing much, much faster than we can even produce human beings to support them. We also were able, through the same forum, to establish AFRILIC, which is a numbers registry for Africa. It did not exist, meaning that the African continent was covered by 3 other registries, but currently we have been successful in establishing as a single entity, like it's supposed to be on continent-wide basis, and they develop policies that are suitable for Africa in terms of numbers, IP numbers, and so on, ports. The reason why I mention this is that together, these two groups and Association of African Universities have signed an MOU to establish African Research and Educational Networks, meaning promotes research and educational networks, not merely internet, but such that the universities and the research organizations can collaborate on various content-like research that maybe helps us address fundamental issues of climate and so on. However, this AFRIL initiative also has helped us establish some collaboration with Asian researchers, and that is the reason why I mentioned that here. Meaning that there's a group of researchers in Asia, typically Japan, Korea, China, and so forth, who are working very closely with the African technical community to establish various working groups for doing research in the area that I am working at. And you can go to a website, www.africaasia.net, to keep track of some of the things that we are doing. Now, if it turns out that some of you would like to participate in this technical aspect, I'll be very glad to make some contact with you so that we can proceed. What work are we doing? We are looking at measurements. We are looking at how to develop the next generation internet, whether it's the normal one or the one for the other billion, meaning the very poor who would never really have the full connectivity you are thinking about. For example, how do we use delay tolerant networks so that places where the internet goes off for days, they can still benefit from it, or the areas where they could use maybe a less connection-oriented mechanisms such as SMS to still serve the internet. So that's to just give you a sense of the collaboration that exists between the technical community in Africa and those in Asia. And I think that goes well to support the effort that has been started, and I'll mention that for you to factor into your debate here. With that, I'd like to open up the session, and I will do so by inviting Professor Harub Othman. He's trained in law, and he's a professor of the Institute of Development Studies in Dar es Salaam. He also heads the Legal Aid and Human Rights Center in Zanzibar. So, Professor Haruk, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me to come here to take part in this discussion. This is an important area, as has already been mentioned by many speakers. And we say that economics is so important. Economy is so important that it should not be left only to economists. And ICT is so important that it should not be left only to technologists, but others also must get involved. We must run while they walk was a title of a biography on the life of Julius Nyerere, written more than 35 years ago by an American author. It came from a speech that Nyerere made urging Tanzanians and Africans to make great leaps forward in their development processes if they wanted to catch up with the developed world. But almost 4 decades since that speech was made, Tanzania and Africa are very far behind the developed world. And the question is why? Man's struggle has been to master his environment. Whether it was a period of gathering wild foods and hunting for wild animals, or that of Stone Age and of the Industrial Revolution, man's purpose has been to mold his surroundings to benefit his needs. It is true that at times his discoveries went to destroy the very nature that he depended on. But that was on the notion that a better world, technologically, economically, or even politically, would be born out of the ruins of such destruction. No wonder then that a lot of innovations and discoveries that man has made over the centuries have been of dual use. The development of capitalism did release labor force from the fetters of feudalism. Thanks to the Industrial Revolution, mass production became the norm, and new vistas were opened for the development of science and technology. Unlike now, when orthodoxy imposed on Africa by the developed world demands that the role of the state should be confined to the maintenance of law and order. In the development of capitalism, state presence was felt everywhere. The state directed and funded researches, opened up roads and railways, and development communication systems. In its higher forms, it did turn other people's territories into its markets, and later on, physically control them. But before the advent of colonialism, Africa was at par with Europe, and in certain areas, even surpassed it. The world-renowned historian, Guyanese historian, Dr. Walter Rodney, in his seminal work, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, remarked that Africa went into colonialism with a whole, and came out of it still with a whole. It seems that more than 500 years of very active involvement with Europe did not transform Africa into a powerhouse of innovation.